No origin of life researcher is going to use Farina's answers as their answers. If Farina's answers are real answers, then why don't the experts in origin of life just take his answers and shut Jim Tour down? Why don't they do it? Because they're not real answers. They dig their own grave when they say you have to understand systems chemistry. Because a cell is a system. It is several layers working on top of layers, working on top of layers. It's not independent little things. Yeah, my producer told me stay passionate but friendly. Okay. Will you be going through more papers? You previously mentioned also responding to Swamidas. Would you also respond in more detail to Paul Rimmer, who was on Capturing Christianity? Thanks. Well, I had intended when I made that second series, I had intended about talking about the other experts that Mr. Farina had cited. There were 3 experts that came on his channel, and I addressed all of those 3. Bruce Lipschitz, and then Steve Benner and Lee Cronin. But he had mentioned, for example, Joshua Swamidas, and he had mentioned Jack Sostek. So actually what I did is I even recorded those, but I never released them because what happened in the meantime is that Dave accepted a debate challenge and we did the debate instead. I'll tell you the other thing that happened. There were several things happening at that instance. My dad had passed away in February of this year, and so I got hit with that, and then all of the things that are associated with that, not just the emotional part of losing my father, but also all the things that had to be taken care of with his home issues and things like that. And then on top of it, I actually felt kind of dirty. I was going after scientific colleagues and calling them out on statements that they had made. And Joshua Swamidas is not just a friend of mine. I would say he's a good friend of mine. We correspond quite often, and whenever, and then we talk occasionally. But I consider him a good friend, and I just didn't feel good about going after him like that. And the other was Jack Sostek. After the first video that I did in Dallas, when I said about Jack Sostek and I talked about his work, he had sent me an email, and it was very kind. He says, "You were pretty hard on me in that video," and I wanted to apologize to him for saying he's lying to you. That was inappropriate to have said those words. It was hyperbole, but not a huge deal. But I wanted to apologize to him. So I said, can I get you on the phone? Because I'd like to apologize to you with my voice and not just by email. And so he gave me his number. I called him, and we had a great conversation. So I feel that he's always been gracious to me. Even though I have big disagreements with him, he didn't go on Dave Farina's program. Neither did Joshua Swamidas. Mr. Farina just cited them and cited their work. They were way too smart to go on his program and stand behind him in that. So I was already feeling kind of dirty going after colleagues like that in a big social forum. So we're not going to air those. They were never really produced. Eric had just made one pass at it, my producer, and then I said, let's just stop. We're not going to issue these because I did the debate instead. So that's kind of where that stands. Okay, so the next question is, hello, Dr. Tour. I'm not a scientist, but I find your research in these videos on origin of life very interesting. You seem to have given the other researchers a lot of freebies, but have also stipulated a lot of parameters. I understand the need to define the parameters, but do you think that the other researchers will respond that the parameters are too tight, unrealistic, designed to make them fail? I don't know how they're going to respond. I'd just like to see them respond. One person did write to me, and this is interesting. I think that I was very generous with my parameters. If you have a 90% yield reaction in just make a dimer, and you want to make a polymer out of that, you're toast. It just doesn't work. I explained in one of my videos the Carruthers equation. You really do have to be 99.99% to have any decent molecular weight. And so I think I was actually quite generous. I was quite generous. Yeah, I gave them a lot of freebies in that I gave them all the Enantiopure starting materials. But then to say, for example, you had to have that regioisomer, that particular regioisomer, that chemoselectivity on making the sugars, I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, even if I gave them have the yield 80%. It doesn't matter. I mean, that thing is just so hard to do. And yeah, I mean, all of these are impossible. You think that I'm going to give them something that I think is possible? Yeah, all of these. And all of these are questions that have to be answered. So in fact, I know some of you are wondering, what did this person write to me? So one of the 10, I won't mention his name, but one of the 10 wrote to me, he said, the emergence of life goes way beyond these narrow questions. Narrow questions. You know, I could have asked 500 questions. I limited it to 5. You have to solve 500, thousands. You have to solve thousands of questions in order to solve this thing. And I just put 5 before them. And you know, there's 4 classes of compounds which we've talked about before. You've got to make the polypeptides, which are all your enzymes and your proteins. You've got to make the DNA and the RNA. You have to be able to make that, and then you have to make the polysaccharides, the sugars. You have to get those polymerized, and you have to make all the starting materials for them, which I just gave them. And then you have to also have the lipids, all right? And so the lipids don't form polymers. So I took 3 of the 4 fundamental classes that you have to get and said, okay, make them. You say you're near life. Okay, just make these classes of compounds. And I didn't even, you know, in 2 of them, In 2 of them, I just said, make the dimer. You didn't even have to polymerize them. Just make the dimer, and I'm okay. You have to do that hundreds of times, thousands of times in the case of sugars, very often thousands of times to have the polysaccharides that you need. So I thought I was being really gracious. Anyway, so he says, you know, he's just trying to sidestep these questions. I mean, that's the only response that I've gotten so far, to sidestep the questions and to say, and this person had actually said that he would debate me, and he even put up a tweet saying that taking a poll, should I debate a prominent scientist that is also a bit of a creationist? And the last I saw, 67% of the people said, yes, debate him. And the others said, no, it's not even worth debating him. So even his own community said to debate me. And now he's used this challenge as an excuse not to debate me. Go figure, you know? And okay, so the next question. Why are you setting the parameters for a field of study that you aren't an expert in? Okay, yeah. You know, so yeah, I'm an expert in synthesis. That I'm an expert in. So this whole thing that I can't understand the chemistry because it's origin of life is a bunch of nonsense. I can certainly understand chemistry, and this is what I put before them. And I've certainly read enough about this. For years, I've read about this topic, and I'm a chemist. I'm a PhD chemist, so I certainly can understand these things. If you say that I'm not an expert because I haven't published in this, no, I have published in this. I have several articles in this critiquing it. For me to jump into an area like this, Jack Sostek asked me to join them in this area. He said to me, Jim, if you join us in this, we'll get this thing solved. I don't think that I can help them very much because this is a topic that I don't even know how to approach it very well. So anyway, I'm asking fundamental questions, just fundamental questions. So why don't these experts then answer the questions? Let them answer the questions. This is what I put before them. All right, the next questions. Hey, James, a fan from down under. You say we will someday figure out how life was formed. I simply do not understand why you think a materialistic explanation for how life formed does not undermine your work here. Isn't the whole point to illustrate its impossibility through natural channels and therefore God? What is the point of your series if you are comfortable with materialistic explanation for abiogenesis? Okay, so I'll tell you my standpoint. If you haven't noticed, I bifurcate my questions about origin of life from my faith. Everybody wants to couple these, especially the origin of life experts want to couple these so they can dismiss me. But I never bring God into it. They bring God into it. I never bring God into it. And I bifurcate my science. I've written a lot of papers, hundreds and hundreds of research papers. You can read every one of them. No mention of God. Every one of them. No mention of God. I'm a scientist. I deal in materials. I deal in compositions, and that's the topic in which I am presenting this. This has nothing to do with my believing God or not believing in God. This is just presenting a topic. Now, why do I say I think it's going to be solved? Because humans have solved so many things, but it is very far from us. How could I ever say we will never solve this? How could I ever say? What if a person said in 1950, they will never understand genetic code. We'll never know the origin of this. This is too obscure. This is hidden. Oh, this is only for God. For God is the secret things. No, I mean, and then a few years later, we understood the genetic code in DNA. I mean, how can I ever suggest the negative? That's not something that I can do as a naturalistic scientist. I'm a scientist that works in the naturalistic framework, and I can't do anything otherwise. So that's the answer to that. Okay, does peer review system need to be overhauled, replaced, or some type of legitimate oversight implemented? It seems to have a lot of flaws that permit significant errors, frauds, scams. Yeah, it does permit errors. It does permit frauds. It does permit scams. I don't know that there's any better prescription on the table. You're supposed to send it out to people, and that they're supposed to look at it and judge on it objectively. Let me tell you some of the things, some of the problems that go on. I get probably 5 or more, somewhere between 5 and 10 requests per day, email requests per day from editors to review papers that have been sent to them. 5 or 10 per day. So think about that. And each review can easily take an hour. And you say, well, can you really critique something in an hour? No, not really. Sometimes it can take 8 hours. But who has that kind of time to be critiquing other people's papers? So if you devote an hour to it, I think that that's pretty good. And so how could I ever accept 5 to 10 of those a day? I never could. So I'm very selective. And the reason I get hit a lot with requests is because I've published so much and I'm cited so much in other papers that editors will often look at the citation list and say, okay, here's a person who's cited, they must know the area, and they contact me. And I've worked across so many different areas of science, and I critique not just the specific things in my field. I'm asked to critique many areas that go way beyond my field, but are still chemistry, things that I might know about. And so this idea that because I don't publish, I don't do specific research in the area of origin of life, I have no business critiquing it. Hey, I critique papers all the time at the request of editors. So what's the alternative? Is it just a body of people, a committee? That's even worse. What's the alternative? Is it ChatGPT or something that can critique this? I hardly think so. So I don't know of a better way. Are there flaws? Yes, but I just don't know of a better way. And it seems in this community, though, that they are really allowing many things in that really shouldn't be in there, and claims that go way beyond the research. So a lot of times I've said, the science is interesting, but the claims based on the science have extrapolated way too far. And as I read in my opening statement in that debate that I was in, that the superlatives in abstracts is just blowing up, where people put all these superlatives. That's happening across all fields, but origin of life is really to the extreme now. And people want to keep suggesting, and that's why I keep citing this survey that John Narcombe took, where 2/3 of the general public, 80% of those who were surveyed having some degree of college education, from associate's degree to PhD degree, believe that scientists have already made life in the lab, and so 2/3 of those believe that. So that's the problem. We're just really confused on this thing, but yeah. So it's I don't know of an alternative to it. Okay, in business there are truth in advertising directives to prevent fraud, when companies try to sell their product and services to the public for profit. Can you help start an official commission for truth in science directives to prevent fraud, scams when scientists try to sell their hypotheses to the public for funding and profit? Well, can I? I don't even know that I have another nanosecond in my day, so it's going to be unlikely that I'm going to be able to do much on this. But how do you check a lot of things? So a lot of data comes through, and people say that these reports are not reproducible. In fact, there was a report in Nature a few years ago that something like 2/3 of the reports in biochemical research, when drug companies picked it up, they couldn't reproduce it. Now, sometimes they can't reproduce it because things are not easy to reproduce. It took years for those graduate students to get it figured out, and others may not be reproducible at all. But I'll tell you that there are people that have told me they've not been able to reproduce my procedures, and I say that's odd. There's 10 other groups around the world that have reproduced it. So you can have a small impurity in your system, and it can make it hard to reproduce. But how could I check? So if I'm getting 5 to 10 requests per day from editors to review papers, they don't expect me to go in the lab and do the chemistry. That took years for those authors to do. It would take me easily 6 months to try to reproduce it. So that's not what they're asking me to do. I've just got to look at this and make an assessment and assume that these people are not being dishonest. That's all I can do. I can't go in deeply and check it. So it's a very hard system to police, and all you can do is build on trust. There's some things that come through that aren't true, and in particular, it's when the more the money starts mixing with it. So, yeah, origin of life is bad, but things in medicine are really bad. I mean, and when things in energy now, as more and more money comes mixing with it, there are claims that just aren't quite right. But I'm not sure how to deal with it. But peer review is probably one of the ways. But as far as me starting a committee, I'm not going to do that. My day is too full. I think my wife would clobber me if I told her I was picking up something else. Okay. I was wondering if dogs don't disprove the theory. Of evolution by random mutation and natural selection, with the fact that thousands of years directed evolution has still not speciated them. The Great Dane and the Chihuahua still produce healthy offspring, even though they were artificially selected deliberately to be as different as possible. What do you think, good sir? Well, I think that the typical position on that would be that a few thousand years is not enough. The typical position would be that you would need, for dogs, you'd need a lot more than a few thousand years. You'd need something on the order of millions of years. That would be the cry on that. But if you look at fruit flies, though, things where you can just turn over generations in a number of hours and just keep turning over and turning over, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, it's a hard play to do this, to see speciation. And there are things that you'd want to study in it. You don't want to study it in dogs. They live too long. You'd want to study it in something that their lives turn over much faster. Okay. Do you think that origin of life researchers will ghost you on your challenge? Do you think they fear losing funding when they cannot show progress since Miller-Urey experiment? Well, it's been what, like 4 days or something like that. Will they ghost me? I presume a lot of them will not respond to me. I mean, ghosting is sort of with intent. I think that they'll not respond because they just don't know the answer. It's just hard. The one person wrote to me, and some of you will be able to figure out who it is because you will have seen the challenge on his tweet. But he said he's not going to debate me because I put forth this challenge. Oh, so I put forth this challenge. Why should that then stop a debate? And in fact, it's not even I challenged him to debate. I invited him to join me on my YouTube channel and just discuss why he thinks that we're gonna crack this problem soon. Why he thinks that he's going to create life in his lab very soon. Just to be able to talk about it. He was the one that talked about about a debate. I said, okay, if you want a debate, fine. We can do it on my channel. We could do it on anybody else's channel. You choose. And so he was supposed to write out for me the terms. I said, you write it out, you send it to me, and then I'll look at it. If I want to tweak it, I'll tweak it, or if not, we'll just go with whatever terms you decide on. We can go with. And then I come out with this challenge. He says, I'm not debating you. What do you want me to say? These are just the same 5 questions that I gave to Mr. Farina. And it's not like these are the 5 questions, just the 5. There are 5,000 questions. There are so many questions. I just chose 5. And because these are the fundamental materials. And then where do you get the information from? This is fundamental. And so if you had it, and you can get all of these compounds, we can take a cell. You can take a cell and deconstruct it and take all the different pieces out. And so, can you put Humpty Dumpty back together again? No, nobody knows how to do that. So of course I asked them 5 questions that nobody knows how to do. You think I'm going to ask them 5 questions that can be solved, and then I'm going to take down all the stuff from Origin of Life? I'm trying to show the world that even the experts can't solve it, because YouTubers, Farina says he can solve it. He says that I gave him these just make the dimer of D and K. And he said, and he started quoting these papers. Those papers had nothing to do with it. That's why I wanted him to come to the board, because when he comes to the board, he has to start with those 2 starting materials. And he's not starting with those 2 starting materials. He wants to start with one, and then this amino nitrile. No, you have to start with those 2, because those are the ones that people say they can get in an antimerically pure form, although in some cases it's quite tough. So he didn't want to start with those. And then he put something up on his YouTube channel. This is what James wanted me to write on the board. No, that's not what I wanted you to write on the board, because that doesn't solve it either. That doesn't solve it, because he's working from the thioacid. He's not starting with the carboxylic acid. That's why if he went to the board, he'd have to start with the carboxylic acid. He started with the thioacid. The thioacid takes about 5 steps to make from the carboxylic acid in that very paper. It cites how they made the thioacids, and you look it up, and it's like 5 steps using totally non-prebiotic chemistry, using all modern methods in organic solvents that are not available on a prebiotic earth, using organic reagents that are not available on prebiotic earth. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to show the world that no Origin of Life researcher is going to use Farina's answers as their answers. Or if Farina's answers are real answers, then why don't the experts in Origin of Life just take his answers and shut Jim Tour down? Why don't they do it? Because they're not real answers. Because they don't answer anything. And then when it went to the polynucleotide, he says montmorillonite clay. Montmorillonite clay, the data is 30 to 70%, gives you the 2,5, in addition to branching. So he had no answer to that. And then he says, well, it could still be active. The question was, how would you make this? That was the question. Paul Rimmer didn't even answer, how would you make this? He answered whether you can bear some 2,5 in there and still have it active. That wasn't the question. Paul Rimmer also took the amino nitrile. He didn't start with those 2 acids. And you say, well, it's kind of scary, he said, to go to the blackboard in front of a group of people and write on the blackboard. So Paul wasn't in front of a blackboard. Paul planned for that meeting on Capturing Christianity. He could have written that out and put that on a PowerPoint slide and shown it. He didn't have to write it in front of people, because it's a non-answer. It doesn't answer the question. And then when it goes to the sugars, to say that you would use enzymes, I'm telling you, that's like saying, how would you go from A to B? And the student writes, chemicals. Chemicals. That's not an answer. What do you mean chemicals? You're going to have to be more specific than that, and to just say enzymes. Where, first of all, you couldn't make any enzymes, because you couldn't make the polypeptides, which is what constitutes most enzymes, and you couldn't make the RNA, which constitutes a small number of the enzymes, and so you don't have enzymes available, because you can't answer 1 and you can't answer 2. And so then how do you do number 3? You can't. And then even if you had enzymes, what enzymes? What enzyme is going to form that does this thing for all the different types of sugar polymerizations that you need? So why don't the experts pick these things up? Because it's crazy hard. They're not going to pick up Farina's answers. No way. No way. Those aren't real answers. And so now what I wanted to do is I wanted to show the world that Farina's answers were not real answers, because none of these guys are going to go near his answers with a 10-foot pole. And if they have the answers, let them come up with it. And I don't do any more videos on Origin of Life if they come up with it. They can just shut me down. All right, I think I answered that question. Are Amino Nitriles the ones... Okay, yeah, my producer told me stay passionate but friendly. Okay, I'll calm down. Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry about that. All right, are Amino Nitriles the ones that Pounder uses prebiotically relevant? Yes, I think they are. I think they are. I mean, with some work, you can use prebiotic reagents to get them, but not with not controlling stereochemical purity. That's the other thing that when Dave presented it, as soon as you use the aminonitrile, you can't control the stereochemical purity. And so when Paul Rimmer showed it, Paul just used planar structures. You never saw him show any stereochemistry because you can't control the stereochemistry. I wrote D and K. Implicit in that is that you have the right stereochemistry in the process in the products. So it doesn't solve the problem, but are those aminonitriles prebiotically relevant? Simple ones certainly are. Some of the ones with the different side chains, you could probably finagle it, but it's going to take a lot of long synthesis to make those, and which begins to pull it out of the realm of possibility for prebiotic, but I'll give them that. I've given them all the amino acids anyway. All right, can you state an alternative falsifiable hypothesis as to origin of life? How would your God as catalyst fit in such a prediction? So there you go, mixing God with when I haven't mixed in God. You see what it is? I always get accused of God of the gaps. I get accused of being a super Christian guy, super Jesus guy, and so they want to dismiss my science. I haven't introduced God into this at all. Why do you introduce God? This is not how we answer scientific questions. We don't introduce God into this. I have to calm down. We don't introduce God into this. We're so nice. We don't introduce God. Please don't ask that. So I don't know how God fits into this as catalyst. I don't know how God created these things. Certainly God created everything fundamentally, but I don't introduce that into my science. I talk about scientific explanations to these things, so I don't introduce that sort of thing. All right, how do you feel about the debate? How do I feel about the debate? Well, I did not like my performance. I think I got so hot, so frustrated. Not at the name calling. People thought, oh, look at the names he's calling. The man was reading a script. He said all these things already in his videos. Go to his videos. You watch them. It's painful. I mean, he said all these same things, so he was just reading the same script. So I had heard this many times before because I had to go through the videos just a bunch of times to pick out all the references and read all those references and everything. For 4 months, I was reading references and reading the experimentals for those references because he cited 50 papers or something. And so I didn't just have to read the papers. I had to read the supplemental to really understand what they did in those papers. And the supplemental sometimes can be 100 pages. So anyway, there was a lot of reading for me in preparation for that debate, and every answer he threw up there was a non-answer. It was a non-answer. It meant absolutely nothing. And so that was where my frustration was. So the way I was shouting and screaming, no, I'm not pleased with that at all. And like I said in the beginning, that was the first debate I was ever in, and I may be too hot-headed to ever be in a debate. I may be. Maybe I just have to, reserve myself to a classroom and talk to people because, I'm not proud of that. But as far as the answers that I gave and the questions that I asked, I think were spot on. But I was not pleased with my performance because I just lost my cool too much. Not because of the name calling, not at all. The name calling didn't bother me at all. I'd heard all those names before. And I knew the guy's language and the way he does it. It was the frustration that I don't think that I was communicating to the audience how wrong his answers were, because he kept throwing up titles of papers that he said substantiated this. And how can I explain in 2 minutes, 1 minute, how can I explain how wrong that is to a lay audience? But every synthetic chemist in there realized that those were non-answers. All right, do you believe in evolution or not? Do I believe in evolution? So is evolution a religion that I should believe in it or not believe in it? You know, I'm trying to understand. Is evolution a belief system? You mean if you know? So I don't quite understand that word believe. If you mean do I embrace every aspect of a neo-Darwinian approach? Absolutely not, because Darwinism has changed. This is morphed with time. So this whole thing about natural selection and random mutation being sufficient is discounted by many geneticists themselves. This is something Joshua Swamidass, a geneticist, taught me, that geneticists themselves say that it's more neutral drift, the small changes from parent to child and to offspring, not random mutation, and it's universal common descent, not natural selection, that is driving this. So they themselves have morphed on this thing. So do I believe it? No, because I don't think it's a belief system. Do I buy into all aspects of it? No. Do I think that there's a lot lacking in it? Yes. Do I know anybody that buys into all aspects that have been taught since Darwin? No. All right. Hi, James. How can we possibly recreate or reproduce the origin of life when its beginning came outside of the life or world we are in? Yeah, that's a hard problem. So what we can do is we can try to mimic the conditions that might have been available on an early Earth, like Miller-Urey did. They sort of mimicked the conditions that they thought might be available on an early Earth. Now, the concentrations of certain things were probably much higher than would have been available, but it's the reproduction of things that would have been available. But how about doing it in our laboratory? How about just in our modern laboratory making life? How's that? I mean, Lee Cronin said said in 2011 that he'd have it done, that he'd probably have it done in his lab in 2 years. I think he missed the deadline. Jack Sostek in 2014 said he would have it done in his lab in 3 to 5 years. He missed the deadline. Dimitar Seselov said that it'd be done within 5 years. He said in 2014. He missed the deadline. And then Jack Sostek, when he was questioned about that, he said, well, you know, I may have been overly optimistic. We're working on making the RNA. It's a big difference. I'm going to create life, and I'm working on getting some RNA. I mean, that's a big difference. He hasn't even made the RNA yet, and life is much, much more than just a piece of RNA. And a piece of RNA, as I showed in that challenge, doesn't last very long. You got hours when you got one molecule of RNA. Now, if you want to make a mole of that stuff, think about how that sequence is going to get made in a mole. You're not going to have a mole of the same sequence. So it's really, really a difficult problem. How about, I'll even take it if they can make it in their own lab, using every modern method. How's that? And once they can do that in their own lab, then we can say, okay, what parameters did I have to introduce into this that would not have been available on an early Earth? And it's going to be like every parameter, every starting material, everything. But just take a cell, deconstruct it. You have all the components now. You already have the DNA and the RNA in the precise sequence that you want. So you have the informational code. You have all the enzymes there. You have all the small molecules there, everything. You have all the lipids, all the polysaccharides. Now just put it back together. Boy, that'd be a Nobel Prize. That would be, and deservedly so. I'll take it if they can just do it in their own lab. Okay. What are your thoughts on the RNA world hypothesis as a way the way DNA came to exist? Is this a valid approach to the aspect of origin of life? And if not, why? Well, the RNA hypothesis has been around since, the early 1960s, that the first molecule was not DNA, but it was probably RNA. And then when we found out that RNA could act as an enzyme as well, that gave more credence to it. But the problem, as many people have pointed out, and Jack Sostek himself, he's an RNA expert, is that you don't have very long. the stability of RNA just isn't there. So RNA, if you think I gave real strictures in the challenge, I said, assume that RNA has a half-life of 100 days at room temperature in water. That was being very, very gracious. It generally doesn't last that long, but its stability just isn't there. Now, if you have one molecule of RNA that has the right sequence to make to be a template for the protein that you're going to want to make, the polypeptide that you're going to want to make, you have hours. So remember, for the RNA to form, it can't have any other monomers around. So for the RNA to form, no amino acids can be around. Why? Because the amino acids would disrupt the polymerization of the nucleotides. So the RNA has to be totally pure, away from all other compounds when it polymerizes. Now, say you get the one molecule. Say you get the one molecule that's of the right sequence. You have something on the order of a few hours, as I showed the calculation. That's it. So somehow it's going to have to find all 20 amino acids. From where? Are there any chemical producers that have bottles of those? And then as soon as there's an RNA formed, let's dump those in. All 20 of the amino acids. Where does it come from? This is a hard problem. And let me read you. I have something here. A quote from Steve Benner. I mean, one of the problems with RNA here. Let me see if I can find this. Let's see. So he talks about the stability of RNA and what RNA would do. So let's see here. Okay, there it is. Now he says this. Benner says that let me get the exact quote so nobody can say that I've got this thing wrong. Okay. So Benner says, but within the pool are molecules that catalyze reactions, including some that catalyze the formation and copy of themselves, one of the essential steps for Darwinian evolution. But say there are 10 million or 100 million more molecules that catalyze the destruction of RNA. You see the problem? So what he's saying is, if you did get RNA to form randomly, and you say that RNA could duplicate itself. Now, no RNA has ever duplicated itself. With all human intervention, strongly primed, they haven't been able to duplicate it. It only duplicates about 10% of itself, and that 10% isn't even useful to duplicate any more of itself, and 10% is not a duplicate copy. But he says, if you could get one, there would be other molecules in there, other RNAs, that would catalyze the destruction of that nice template that you want to build off of. And not just an equal amount. He said 10 million or 100 million more that catalyze the destruction of RNA. That's what you're up against. And he said that in a podcast on Event Horizon, and it was entitled New Origin of Life Research Shows Alien Life May Be Common with Steve Benner in Event Horizon on July 21, 2022. Okay, so that's the problem. I don't even remember the question. But anyway, the next question is: evolutionists like to think of incorrectly copied DNA code sequences as new information. How would you define information? So, evolutionists like to think of incorrectly copied DNA code sequences as new information. I got it. How would you define information? Okay, so new DNA, if it's not precisely copied from its other counterpart, would have a region now that could have new information in it because it's not the same information, and it could randomly form now some pieces that would have new information. So I concede on that. Yeah, Yeah, and what does that new information do? Is that new information generally going to be advantageous or deleterious? But yes, that if you miscoded, you have something, and generally, if you have a miscode, that's some genetic defect, and that causes real problems. That's the general pathway. It causes real problems. Can I envision it doing something that makes something different? Sure. Can it make something that's equivalently good? Yes. Could it make something that's even better? Yes. So that could certainly happen. So I'll concede that. Yes. Would you think of William Lane Craig basically saying you're a terrible dresser? Okay. So when William Lane Craig was doing a critique of the debate, he said I should have worn a blue sport coat. I think he said I should have worn a blue sport coat with a white shirt, and that I was too old, that Dave was much younger and more handsome and taller than me. That's what he said. So I didn't know. Okay, next time I do a debate, he's a skilled debater. Next time I do a debate, I will wear a blue sport coat, a blue blazer or something. I won't wear a black coat and a dark tie. I'll wear a blue coat, a white shirt, and I don't know, a light blue tie. As far as my age, I can't do anything about that. Yeah. So yeah, I can't do anything about that. So anyway, that's the best I can do. All right. Do you think you'd ever be able to convince people who are already have their minds made up about origin of life and have their biases no matter what the evidence? Yeah, I do. I see it all the time. People contact me all the time that after seeing my videos, they realized the magnitude of the problem. They never considered it before. They had no idea that we were so far behind on origin of life than what was projected in the press, that they feel as if they've been deceived in their high schools and in their college education by not knowing this. So yeah, I've convinced a lot of people. What do you think of Aaron Ra's question that it must have happened and evolved because we are here? Well, I think I answered his question at the end of the debate, that just because we're here, so nobody argues with that. We're here. So what? So the question is not that we are here. Nobody argues with that. Nobody argues with that. The question is how we got here. How we got here. That's the question that we came to debate. So I didn't even understand his question. Yeah, we're here. But nobody debates that we're here unless, well, I guess you could debate it these days. Maybe we're all living in a matrix. This is all a simulation. but if you take that we're alive and here, yeah, I'll concede that. We're alive and here. The question is, how did we get here? That's the topic of all of this discussion. All right. Is there a way to force origin of life researchers to amend their public positions to ensure that invalid information is not generating falsehoods? Is there a way to force them? No. There's no way to force them. To get them to amend. But I think what I'm seeing, though, is I'm seeing that they're already being a little bit more conservative on their comments in their papers. So if you think that I haven't had an effect on them, I think you're wrong. As I see their more recent papers, they're qualifying themselves and they're being more careful because if they go hog wild on their claims, they know that I might call them out. And then if they give quotes to the press that are just crazy overboard, I'm going to call them out. So I think I've already had an effect. And science generally evolves slowly, and things don't readily change, and things take time. And generally what happens is people retire and die, and you have to wait for new people to come in. But think about it. It's a hard thing. Think about it. Somebody's had a career, say 40 years, projecting something and writing a whole bunch of papers. And what happens when we find that that's not quite how it could have happened? I mean, how does that feel? I mean, how would you feel if your work, you did 40 years of work? You think you're going to go, oh, guys, I was wrong. Look at that. No, you're not going to want to talk about it. So I understand. I understand their pain. but you can't force them to do anything. We're not in that kind of profession. To what extent, if any, should investigator interference by origin of life scientists be permitted? And what formal disclosure announcements should be required to prevent misleading the general public? To what extent should investigator interference? Well, a good paper was written by Clemens Reichert, 2018, Nature Communications. And he talked about that problem with investigator interference. This whole thing about disclosures to prevent misleading the general public, that's not something traditionally used in our field. But it's that's I don't see how you can have a disclosure. I guess the editor could put in a note that these statements do not have much verification. But if he or she editor is going to stick in a note like that, why not just make the author remove that statement, which the editor can certainly do. Editors have a lot of liberality in what they can do, so they can be the ones policing this in a sense, and they can be the ones that are requiring people to remove certain statements. But you can't blame the editor for everything because the editor can't read every word. You say they're the editor. No, they have staff that reads it for grammatical things. They're depending on the reviewers to read this. And I don't know any reviewer that reads the entire manuscript and all of the experimental. I don't know any reviewer that does, because it would just take them, like I said, it would take them 8 hours to really get through this and to comprehend all of this. So you read certain parts and you look at the schemes and you critique certain parts, but you can't catch every word. And if editors expect me to read every word in a manuscript and every word in a supplemental, don't send me the papers to review, because there's no way I can do all that. Now, as far as papers coming out of my group, I've read the whole thing. That I can do, but it's not from other people's groups. I just don't have the time. Okay. Hello. What is the reason that origin of life research results always get exaggerated and inflated? Is it just bad media coverage, or is it deliberate atheist misrepresentation, or maybe just wishful thinking? I don't think it has a whole lot to do with atheism that's causing them to say that. I think it's wishful thinking, certainly bad media coverage, but you can't throw all this problem at the doorstep of media. There are a lot of exaggerated claims in the papers themselves, and then those might get turned up a notch when it gets to the media. But my experience in dealing with the media is that 9 times out of 10, not all the time, but 90% of the time, they will give you key parts, either all of what they've written or key parts of it at your request prior to its publication, so that you can check it. Different media outlets have different strictures. Some would never send you the manuscript. Some would have a checker call you. So, for example, when I did something for the New Yorker, they wouldn't give me the document to critique, and a checker calls me and says, here's a statement. Do we have this accurate? And then I could tweak it with them and get it a little bit more accurate. But there is a lot of exaggeration. And there's pressure to publish. There's pressure to make things look better, and that happens across many different fields. But as far as atheism, I don't believe in God. I say that God doesn't exist. Therefore, I'm going to put in this statement. I don't think that ever happens. Okay. Hello. What is? Oh no. That's so. We got to go on to the next question. Between family, career, church, and upsetting scientific communities, how are you so productive? Well, I'll tell you, I have a good wife, and so she takes care of a lot on the home front. I have 4 kids, and I think I did reasonably well as a father. They all love me, I think, and I was at almost every one of their sporting events, and I'd on a Saturday, I was always in my office all day, but I'd take my son to an early morning soccer practice or soccer game, and then I'd come back to my office, and then I'd run out for a basketball game, and then I'd come back, and I just juggled it. I had I used to carry bags of journals to soccer practices and things, and I'd sit there under a light and read journals. And then when laptop computers came out, I'd be in the stands with a laptop computer, and my son said to me, "You're the only dad in the stands with a computer." I said, "Well, every time you step on that field, I close it. And when you come back on the sidelines, I open it. You get more playing time, I'll close it more." But I was at his football games. And I'll tell you, one of my sons was really good in football. He used to play freshman football, JV, and varsity simultaneously when he was a freshman. So I was at a football game Wednesday night, Thursday night, and Friday night. Think about that. But how was I so productive? I'll tell you, I start my day very early, and I spend time in the scriptures, and I get my mind set on the things of God. And that's the first thing that I do in the morning. I'm in scripture and in prayer. And then I come in with a purpose, and I am focused, and I come in with the great blessings of God. So I don't want to presume any of this is because of Jim Tour. This is the great blessing of God. I don't know how we've discovered so many things that we've discovered. The university tells me that about 25% of the intellectual property that the university owns, and there's 700 faculty in this university, about 25% of their intellectual property, which means their patents, have come out of my laboratory. So, I started a lot of companies. I may have started more companies than all other professors on the campus right now combined. I don't know if that's true, but it's got to be close. So it's a very busy time. I don't know how we've discovered all of these things, and I don't know how we've been really blessed. But I will tell you, I pray a lot that the Lord would make me like Bezalel. Bezalel was a man in the Bible, and it says in Exodus chapter 30, Exodus chapter 31, it says that I've called by name Bezalel, the son of Uri, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah. And I have filled him with the Spirit of God in wisdom, in understanding, and in knowledge of all kinds of craftsmanship. He's the first person in the Bible, actually, to ever say he's been filled with the Spirit of God. Yeah, Bezalel. He was the man that Moses commissioned to build the tabernacle. And between him and his companion, he could work in gold, in silver, and in bronze. He could work in stone cutting and in stone setting. He could work in wood, in fabric, and in perfuming, and he had the ability to teach it. The man was the Renaissance man. And I pray, Lord, make me like Bezalel. Lord, make my students like Bezalel. And go figure, God answers. They discover all sorts of things across all sorts of domains. And that's why, I have companies. I have 3 pharmaceutical companies that I started, materials companies, lots of different materials companies, aerospace type materials, electronic memory materials for computer memory. So we work across all of these different fields, from electronics to pharmaceuticals to materials so a lot of the tough tech or hard tech, it's called. And God is really blessed. And so I give glory to Jesus Christ, the Son of God. If you do not believe in the physical resurrection of Jesus Christ, send me an email and give me a chance to tell you by Zoom why I believe in the physical resurrection of Jesus Christ. Doesn't the unreliability of the biblical texts rule out the Christian God as a likely explanation for the origin of life? I don't know what's unreliable. I mean, people like to throw out this term, it's unreliable. In what way? In what way is it unreliable? I don't know. Give me 5 examples of unreliability. I mean, this is a long book. I mean, certainly you can find 5. What are the 5 unreliable examples? This is a historical document. So I don't know what you're talking about there. I don't agree with your preposition, so I can't answer your question. Can you expand on Benner washing with water in his experiments involved with magnesium? Yeah, so he washed a lot with water, but there's more to it than that. Let me find this. All right, so it's his paper on borate minerals stabilizing ribose. So he says that let me give you the questions that I asked him. So I sent him this by email. This is an email that I sent to him on January 29th, 2023 of this year. I said, Steve, I'll be doing a live stream on my YouTube channel tomorrow, Monday evening, 1/30/2023. So on January 30th, I did a live stream. And I want to speak rightly about your data. So help me out to understand this. And I said, I'm confused about your work. And I said, I'm confused on a few things. And maybe if you can give me some clarity, I can speak with greater accuracy. You say that just the 4 pentoses were made in the C13 NMR, which looks way more contaminated than that to me. But let me understand your claim. There was a filtration prior to the HPLC, as there must be to get poorly soluble base out before injection into the column. And you surely have an HPLC guard column as well, so yet another filtration. So there were 2 filtrations that he went through before he analyzed his data. I say, number 1, how do you know that you were not filtering out larger oligomers and polymers? Because he said there was nothing larger. Number 2, you say that you did not see tar with the borate, but color comes when you generate conjugated alkenes and dienones. So the boron can be preventing elimination, but still many higher oligomers that either precipitated or otherwise did not come through your HPLC might be there, and likely are there, but they were not absorbing in the visible. How did you exclude the possibility in your analysis? So remember, when you're using a UV detector, you only see what's going to absorb in the UV. What was your yield of these 4 compounds based on the glycoaldehyde? Not their relative percentage, but the combined or individual actual mass balance yield, so that we can account for the other material that might have been there. So when he says that there were just these 4 compounds, how do we know if we don't know a mass yield? There might have been a lot, because that's not in his experimentals. I see that the reaction time, calcium hydroxide plus borate, and temperature was 1 hour to 1.5 hours at 45 C to 65 C. Is that correct? Or was it at these other temperatures longer? The experimental protocols don't say, but some of the figure legends and text suggest these values in some of the protocols. I said, based on the tables shown below, I'm again unsure on how you interpret what you have written with respect to what you have told me. Tables S1 and S2 from the Kim. So, I'm going, deep into these conversations with him. I said, are these, you call it half-life. Half-life means that it was there and it's no longer there, and generally suggests that it was lost and not coming back. Or am I wrong on this interpretation? If merely interconverting, that suggests that you reached a thermodynamic equilibrium that does not change, or at least changes very slowly. Are you saying that they are both interconverting rapid and decomposing half-life? When you say interconvert, do you mean just anomer interconversion, or that the stereochemistry of the other centers are changing and thereby changing one carbohydrate into another? If the pentose half-lives are a few hours to 2 days with borate present, then how can you suggest that there are only 4 compounds in the NMR? What are the pentoses decomposing into? Oligomers and polymers, I would think. But if the pentoses are merely interconverting, then why do you not quickly reach an equilibrium and then decomposition cease? So his response to that email, now we had an email dialogue. He and I have dialogued by email many times. You know what his response to that was? 0. No response. Why no response? You asked specifically about the magnesium. So if you wash and wash and wash, you get away all magnesium. I could see why you'd want to use hydrogen peroxide, because he has to get rid of any enzymes that would be there that would degrade RNA, because lots of RNases even in our breath. I mean, so I understand that. But is it realistic to say you've washed and washed and washed because do you have no magnesium around, no free magnesium ion? That's gonna catalyze the decomposition. But I'll give him that. Let's say it was just 4 pentoses that he had. Let's just say his material had 4 pentoses. So just the 4 pentoses he claimed. None of the other stuff that I'm saying. And he says he's gotten 200 mers. So if we just go with his 4 pentoses, that's a 200 mer. There would be 4 pentoses to the 200 power. That's 10 to the 120 RNA combinations. That doesn't even consider his 2,5 linkages and his branching, which he says exists. He has 10 to the 120 different RNA combinations possible just from his 4 pentoses. It was a bunch of trash. Everything the man made in there was trash. As far as washing out the magnesium, yeah, he washed out the magnesium. Is early Earth that clean? I don't know where you're going to find early Earth that doesn't have any traces of magnesium to catalyze the decomposition, but it doesn't matter anyway, as I've shown with the stability problem. If you make one molecule that has the right orientation, the right structure that you need, you've now got to bring in the 20 amino acids, and you've got to bring it in a matter of hours. How does that happen? And if we take his words, in that mixture, there's also going to be other things that are decomposing this structure. So these are real problems. 10 to the 120 is a very big number. 10 to the 90 is the number of elemental particles in the universe. So 10 to the 120 is really big. All right. Can you have a live discussion with Dr. Change Laura Tang and Dr. Rob Stadler about their work and their book, Stairway of Life, which covers many other problems with abiogenesis? I don't know Dr. Tan, but many people have suggested that I bring Dr. Rob Stadler onto my podcast and have a discussion with him. Maybe what I need to do is I need to read their book, his and her book, and have them on. Maybe I can do that. Eric, make a note of that. All right. Can you give some background on the 3 judges and why they were selected? Okay, why were they selected? Well, I chose Steve Benner because he's said some things about me, and I picked on him back. And we've had dialogues. I've had lunch with Steve Benner, and I find him to be a pleasant man. I really do. We were at a conference in Israel a little over a year ago, and he spoke. And then the next day I spoke, and I hit him pretty hard on the things that he said in his talk. And then the next day after that, he and I sat together and had lunch. And some people were walking, how can you two be sitting together having lunch? This is the way scientists are. And we had a good dialogue. And he even discussed about possibly writing a paper together with me. And, that never happened. But so I felt I knew him a little bit. And I wanted to give him the opportunity because he was probably the one that I went after the hardest in my second series. So that's why I chose him. And then Jack Sostek, because he's an RNA expert, and I think he's a fair man. Like I said, I had a conversation with him, and I think he's a very fair man, and I think he's realistic in some of the things that he's now saying, more recently saying. And I have examples of that in my slides here that at any time I can share with you. But I think that some of the claims that he made in 2014, he would never say those things today. And I think some of the lectures that I heard him talk about in the last couple of years, he's been a lot more realistic on different positions. So I think that so because I kind of knew him, and then I chose Clemens Reichert because of his article that he wrote in 2018. Where he said, guys, you can't have this so much interference, so much investigator interference, and you can't be choosing such pure starting materials for your reactions because in nature they would never come so pure. And so when I gave them pure starting materials for this challenge, again, that was being very, very gracious. And so I think that he is a realistic man, and so I wanted to have that diversity, so I chose those 3. And it's not that any of them ever agreed to be judges. None of them agreed to be judges. I just chose those 3. And so I presume if any one of the 10, including those 3, come up with an answer, they'll submit it, they'll email it to those guys, and they'll put Jim Tour out of business. Can you explain how chirality relates to enantiomer? Is chirality a special case we can easily imagine, like in gloves, but really just one of various ways enantiomers are differentiated? Yeah, so enantiomers, a pair of enantiomers, possess a chiral relationship. Chirality just means that the 2 species have non-superimposable mirror images. And the 2 so they have the property of being, so the property of my right hand is it has a non-superimposable mirror image. All right, this is what's spelled out in chirality. You can look at it from a symmetry standpoint to say that it has neither a point nor a plane of symmetry. But that's getting into another. It's easier for the lay public to understand it has a non-superimposable mirror image. So if I hold up my right hand to a mirror, what I will see in the mirror is an image of my left hand. And those two are non-superimposable because my right hand and my left hand are non-superimposable. That's why my right hand doesn't fit into a left-handed glove. And so there's the property of chirality. The enantiomers are the two species that have this non-superimposable relationship. Gloves are enantiomers. A right hand and left hand glove are enantiomers of one another. Molecules are often enantiomers of one another. If they bear a carbon atom that has 4 different groups on it, and if it does not have a meso relationship, meaning an internal plane of symmetry because you have another one of those, but that gets a little more complex. Are you still going to respond to Dave's video? No, I'm done responding to Dave's video. You know what I've learned? I learned that YouTubers poke me hoping that I will respond, and it really ups their subscribers. When Dave first came against me, he had like 780,000 subscribers. Now he has like 2.6, 2.7 million. Now, many people, not just one or two, many people have told me that those are not real subscribers, that they think he paid some organizations in Asia that'll up your subscriber count because they figured out that they figured out this by many metrics. One is the amount of money that he makes. It's like 0.06 cents per subscriber, whereas other channels are making like 11 cents per subscriber, or some crazy high number, or maybe it was yes, or yeah, and I don't remember, some factor of 10 or 50 higher than his, which would suggest that those are not real. And then the other thing is, if you look at his engagement, the engagement of his subscribers, with that many, there's very little engagement. If he has 2.6 million, all I'm saying it's gone up heavily since he poked me. And then what I noticed is that other people poke me and they want me to take them on. They say, hey, I made this video about you. What do you have to say about this? And so I see what they're doing. They're just goading me. And I didn't know this. I was, much more naive. No, but I'm done with Dave. I had this debate. The world saw what Dave is like. The world saw what I am like. And I'm done with him. So he can say all that he wants. And I'm not going to say that I will never engage again, but in a sense, I already did when I put out that challenge. I put up what I thought about him, and on this, I said some things about him. But am I planning to go after him? No, I'm done. So he can say what he wants. I'm done. Kind of done. I'm not excluding myself from doing it, but I have no plans. Are scientific papers the sole way to critique scientists? What do you think of the new medium like YouTube for communication? In scientific papers, it's not always easy to come right out and critique other people's work. It can be done, and it's a difficult medium to do it. You can talk about work. You can say, such and such work has been done, but to critique a scientist's body of work is much harder. I am not trying to reach the scientists anymore. I think the chemists see exactly what I see. They just generally haven't studied it. Before I started looking into the origin of life, I didn't know what was going on in this field. I had no idea what was going on in this field. And most chemists don't, but I think that as they see more of this, they're aware of it. This is to the lay public. The lay public doesn't read these journals. You had no idea that Clemens Reichert wrote this article in 2018 about user interference in pure materials, where he's really coming against the community. But he wrote that paper. Why don't you know about this? Because the lay public doesn't read those papers, and even the people in the origin of life community, they just ignored it, and they keep doing the same thing as they've been doing. And so I'm not trying to reach the scientific community. I'm trying to display this to the general public. In the midst of this, the general public does not understand what happened at that debate. They don't understand that every answer that Dave Farina gave was a non-answer. It didn't answer the question, not at all. To say they're enzymes. That's not an answer. That's not an answer. How would this dimerize? That's not an answer. That's like saying chemicals. It's like saying magic. And to say that you could take D and K and dimerize them under those conditions, he said it. So who's right? It's a he said, she said. I mean, who's right, him or me? And so they didn't understand that. So now I want the public to see, let's see if origin of life researchers themselves, the guys that Dave Farina quotes, the people that have gone on his YouTube channel and supported him, Lipschitz, Cronin, and Benner. They must love the guy. They go on his channel. They must love him. Will they take his answers? No, they're not going to go near it. They're not going to go near it. That's a way to display that his answers were non-answers. But in the meantime, it's going to show the world, the community, that these people, even the experts, don't have the answers, let alone a YouTuber. The experts don't have an answer. So I'm trying to reach the masses. Do you think it's possible to determine through science if the origin of life was intelligent design? Not with the traditional methods of science. There are new things coming out in origin of life, where they're saying if it has these certain points. And in fact, Lee Cronin had a recent paper that was really amazing, where it starts pointing in this direction, where you have certain criteria for molecular structure. And when there's enough different points of molecular structure, of complexity there, then you would suggest that this didn't just form randomly. Now, he's not going and saying intelligently designed. Lee wouldn't use those terms. But he's gotten very close to using those terms. And then he used the analogy. Lee loves analogies. Some of them are crazy analogies, but he loves analogies, even in the letter that he wrote to me. Sorry about that. Even in the letter, he loves analogies. But there's this. He says you find an iPhone on the beach. You know that this had some elements in it that go beyond randomness. And this is exactly like the watch on the desert description that many other people have used. And then he comes out with these points of molecular structure that it just didn't form randomly. And the origin of life people are using similar sorts of arguments. So if those techniques, if those methods are going to be accepted in science, and Lee is beginning to bump up against those, then you'd have something to say, okay, there seems to be some design element in it. I don't think they're going to use the term intelligent design because it speaks too closely to what the creationists who they loathe, who they just hate everything about them, have used. So they'd use some other word for it. But if you use the canonical tools of science, it's much harder to say that. It's hard to just throw this at the feet of a creator, just based with the traditional tools of science. Can you speak to the effect of grant money, someone's potential livelihood, in the research process? Does it affect a researcher in how they design the experiment, abstract conclusion? Absolutely. Absolutely. Scientists are people like everyone else. And if we lose our grant money, it's a bad time. It's really a bad time. You might not get tenure, and if you have tenure, it looks really bad. You can't maintain a research group. You lose your grant. So you work very hard to get grant money. I mean, it's you ask most scientists, what do you spend most of your time on? And it's writing proposals. And if you start saying things that start contradicting the field, it's very hard to get funding, because peers not only review your publications, they also review your grants. And it's so competitive. Say you have a National Science Foundation grant. You have to have all excellence. You might have to have 5 reviews, everyone checking off as excellent. Maybe if you're a younger investigator, 4 excellence and a very good will get you funded. But if you have 1 good, never. If one person just gives you good, it's over. If 2 people give you very good and you don't have excellence across, you won't get funded. It's so competitive. And so you start entering a field, and you start saying that this could not have happened that way, it's very hard to get funding. So for those of you who think that I can just jump right into this and start doing it, I would have to get my peers, all the people that I criticize in Origin of Life, to approve my grants and to give me a good rating on my grant proposals, because it goes to the people in that field to assess it. So it's very hard to do this. So yeah, does it affect? Yeah, it certainly affects it. And I think we've seen this type of thing with the recent COVID thing and the things that went along with the molecular structure and the research that went around this. I mean, it's just when money starts getting involved, yeah, things happen, and scientists are just like anyone else. Can you clarify what the rules of the Origin of Life Challenge are? Yeah, the rules are you start with that starting material and show me how you'd get the product using prebiotically relevant compounds, which means everything to the Origin of Life researchers. They know what that means, that you can use conditions that would have been available on an early Earth. You can't use synthetic chemicals that have been devised by human beings. You have to use simple molecules that might have been available on an early Earth, and you have to get there. And so any one of those 10, if any one of those 10 people can suggest an answer to any one of those 5 problems, so you get 10 top researchers have a chance to answer any one of those 5 problems, and the 3 judges agree, yeah, that answers the question, then I take down my content. That's what that means. And but if they can't answer any of the questions in a prebiotic sense, then except the last question. The last question, I even let them use their own modern laboratory. I'll give you your modern laboratory. Tell me how you'd build a cell. And I'll give you all the chemicals from a cell. Now just put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And there they can use their modern lab. And question number 4, they have to come out with something on the code. Let me just elaborate on that, because I haven't gotten any questions on that, and it's worth my showing this. You know, the problem with the code. Where are you going to get this blueprint, this code? Let me find this. Okay, so here's an article. This is this was published in a journal by Eugene Koonin and Armatan Novoselov. They write, so they're trying to find out what is the basis behind this code, and they were trying to figure this thing out. And this was a paper published in 2009, February 2009. They say, however, such scenarios for the code evolution are based on formal schemes whose relevance to the actual primordial evolution is uncertain. A real understanding of the code origin and evolution is likely to be attainable only in conjunction with a credible scenario for the evolution of the coding principle itself and the translation system. He goes on to say, he says, in our opinion, despite extensive and in many cases elaborate attempts to model code optimization, ingenious theorizing along the lines of coevolution theory, and considerable experimentation, very little definitive progress has been made. Nevertheless, in a close analogy to the situation with theoretical approaches, we are unaware of any experiments that would have the potential to actually reconstruct the origin of coding, not even at the stage of serious planning. Summarizing the state of the art in the study of the code evolution, we cannot escape considerable skepticism. It seems that the two-pronged fundamental question, why is the genetic code the way it is, and how did it come to be, that was asked over 50 years ago at the dawn of molecular biology. That might remain pertinent even in another 50 years. Our consolation is that we cannot think of a more fundamental problem in biology. So what he says, we asked the same question 50 years ago to where we are now, and we're going to be asking the same question in another 50 years. Nobody knows where that code comes from. So when Dave Farina says, oh, the DNA is the code itself, that's the code. That's nonsense. That's just nonsense. I mean, I mean, the community does it, and the title of this paper is "The Origin of Evolution of the Genetic Code: The Universal Enigma." And so I just read you portions of this, and how they just have no idea. And so this is available by NIH Public Access, so anybody can access this. Again, the title is "Origin and Evolution of the Genetic Code: The Universal Enigma." All right, can you tell us the difference in information types, Shannon information, etc.? Also, is specified information a term used outside of intelligent design circles? I don't know that specified information is used outside the design circles, but it's a good term to distinguish it from Shannon information. Shannon information is a term that's used, was a guy named Shannon in the 1920s, 1930s. He was figuring out how to get code from random sequences of radio signals. So you can get small bits of information from random sequences, but what you need is a specified code. If you don't like the term specified information, then we go with model code with code. These people use the term code. Do you like that more? Okay, substitute the word code for specified information, because if writing the word specified information makes it somehow untenable for use, then substitute the word code. And these people use code and the code evolution. So if you prefer that term. All right. Hey, James, really, you can't just do some research and write some papers without taxpayer funding? I simply don't believe it. You can't possibly be that dependent on permissions at this point. Okay, that's a question. You can't just do some research and write some papers without taxpayer funding? Well, it doesn't have to be taxpayer funding. It can be, but no, I absolutely have to get funding. Every graduate student that works in my laboratory, I have to pay their salary, which is something like $35,000 a year. Not much, but they're getting free education. I have to pay their tuition. I have to pay their workers' compensation. I have to pay health care for them, and I have to pay for all their chemicals. And for every dollar that I bring in, if it's a government grant, I have to bring in 55 cents to go to the university to use the laboratory for every dollar. So if it's a non-government grant, I have to bring in 65 cents approximately. So I have to bring in $1.65 for every dollar that I want to use in my lab to pay my graduate students and to buy chemicals, and which pays for the disposal, waste disposal, and things like that. So if you know how to do science without funding, let me know. I'd really like to know how you do the science without funding, because I'll take it. All right, Dr. Tour, have you received any interesting revelation of the Scripture or of God in your investigation of cell development? Well, technically, revelation means something that's never been revealed before. If that's what you mean, no. There's no revelation that I've gotten from the Scriptures by studying this revelation of the Scriptures that I've gotten from cell development. But I think I know where you're going, so I won't parse words here. I'll be accepting of the context of what you're saying. Yes, when I study science, it gives me a greater appreciation for God. I'm a synthetic chemist. We make molecules for a living. We do this type of thing. You get a very good sense for what molecules do and don't do. When you're building synthetic molecules, and then you look over here at biology is utterly amazing. How you get molecules to work together to do that sort of function. And that's what we do in nanotechnology. And I'm as far along in this as anyone in the world, just because I work in this area. You know, some of our nano machines that drill into cells to kill them, our motorized nano cars and things like that. It's very hard to get these to do things. And we are just doing just absolutely trivial things compared to what biology does all the time. The biologists don't appreciate what they have their hands on because they've never had to make molecules the hard way without just grabbing it from a natural system. And so this gives me a greater appreciation for God. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. Biology is amazing. Living systems are amazing. A cell is utterly amazing. So yeah, it gives me a great appreciation for this. So in that sense, I have a much greater appreciation for this. And I end up praising God about it all the time. When I saw my kids grow up, and just watching them develop, I thought, how do you get molecules to do these things? I'm looking into a camera. This camera is made out of lenses, made out of glass lenses and silicon. And we know how to build with these things. But try to get these things to happen with molecules, to build from the beginning, designing your own molecules to do something like this and to do all this processing like this. Try to do that with molecules. We do it out of glass and silicon because we can't get molecules to do this. With all these ubiquitous examples in natural systems of eyes around us, you'd think we'd build an eye, we'd build our devices, our cameras, out of molecules just like our own eyes are made because we're good at mimicking. We can't even mimic this thing. It is so amazing, and that gives me a greater appreciation for God. Do you think that there can be a way to sufficiently identify when something is beyond a naturalistic explanation? That I think that may be hard to do. Now science and naturalistic explanations can only gauge things that deal with naturalistic explanations. So science itself cannot make an assessment on a miracle, because that's outside the bounds of what science measures. And so when scientists say, miracles can't happen, well, how do you know that? How do you know they can't happen? Just because you haven't been able to measure it? But there's lots of things that we can't measure, but we will at some point measure. Lots of things we couldn't measure that we can now measure. So, for example, hundreds of years ago, we had no way of really measuring things outside the visible region. So if you went 1,000 years ago, how do you measure outside the visible region of light? So we see in the visible region, that's how we see from about 400 to 800 nanometers. That's all we see, 400 to 750 nanometers, somewhere in there. That's all we see. But just to a lower wavelength, you have the ultraviolet. We have machines now that can detect the ultraviolet region very easily. And then beyond the ultraviolet, you can go to the X-rays. We have machines that can detect X-rays. We didn't used to have those. And then beyond that, you go to gamma rays. We have machines that can detect that. And the other side of the visible, beyond 800 nanometers, you get into the infrared. Our eyes don't detect that. We have machines that can detect that. And then you go beyond that. You go into microwaves and radio waves and microwaves. And so we have machines that can detect that. So for right now, I'm sitting here. I am being bombarded with radio waves. If I put a little radio right here within this antenna, that's going to start playing music. I'm getting hit with the same radio waves that antenna is getting hit with. I don't even feel it. They just go right through me. I have no perception of those. So I don't sense it. So we have instruments that can now detect it. 1,000 years ago, we didn't have those instruments. So there is presumed around us lots of dark matter and dark energy that we have no way of detecting right now. I presume one day we'll be able to detect it. Between dark energy and dark matter, it may be 70 to 90% of everything that's around us. And it's presumed to be there because of the way they do calculation difference of what's missing in the formation of the universe here. But we have no. So I presume one day we will have instruments to detect it. So there are things that we can't detect now that I think we'll be able to detect in the future. Okay, James, do you not see the relationship between YouTubers poking you and what you are attempting to do by running a contest? That's fair enough. That's a very fair question. I'm trying to show the world through this contest to show how clueless we are. Because nobody I don't know, but many people don't believe me. Many people believe that Dave Farina's answers were real answers. Go to his YouTube channel. Read the comments under his YouTube videos. Read about what an idiot James Tour is. What all sorts of things and much worse things than just an idiot. And so yeah, maybe let's see what the world thinks about this, and bring it on. But yeah, I see the relation. That's a fair comment. Do you ever fear your nanotechnology will be used for wrong use? No, I don't think much about that. Could it be used for wrong use? Yes. I mean, a person can take my car and go rob a bank and go run over people with it. So, do I fear that somebody's going to do that? I hope somebody doesn't do that, but I don't live in fear of it. Our nanotechnology, it's going to be hard to do. So even our little nano machines that drill into cells to kill them, you got to use a very strong light. And you'd have to hold a person down. You'd have to inject some of this into them and then shine a light on a specific area and have them drill into the cells. And even then, it's going to take, hold it over there for 10 minutes. I figure if you really want to hurt somebody, you could just hold them down and use a knife and hurt them much faster. So it's going to be hard to do it in that way. But could people take, for example, a graphene and make something interesting that might harm people? Yes, people could do that, I suppose. But they could do that with a lot of things. If I made baseball bats, I mean, a lot more people die from baseball bats than they do from graphene, I suppose. But so I don't worry about it. I just don't think much about it. But could it be done? Yes. As far as crunching the numbers in origin research, who or is there anyone you would suggest as a go-to? As far as crunching the numbers in origin research. Crunching the numbers. You mean to show the statistical improbability of these things? Oh, there's been a bunch of books. Mathematicians have done this for 50 years. 50 years, mathematicians have shown that, hey, this just doesn't work mathematically. And biologists said, well, mathematicians just don't understand biology. But was it the Visnar meeting? I forget the name of it, but there was a meeting maybe even 50 years ago where mathematicians just started watching what these biologists were saying, and they were saying that this doesn't make sense. This whole it wasn't even origins paradigm. It was the evolution paradigm. Wasn't making mathematical sense to them. So yeah, there's been a lot of books written on that, and so I think that you could probably find those. I don't know who the go-to person is, but lots of mathematicians agree with have trouble with that. Do you have a favorite Christian music band artist? I peg you for a classic Petra fan. What about a favorite molecule? Wow. You're going to be able to see that I spend a lot of time in my lab because I don't even know who or what Petra is. I don't know if Petra is a person or a group. I don't know. And do you have a favorite Christian music band artist? A favorite Christian music band artist? I've kind of evolved in my life. I used to like the more in my generation. So in the late 70s is when I came to know the Lord, and so at that time it was Amy Grant was just beginning, and I really liked that kind of music, and this I guess it was called Christian rock or something like that. I don't know. Is Amy Grant rock? I don't know. But then I've kind of morphed, and now I enjoy more the classical Christian music. So if I'm gonna play music, I generally prefer the classical Christian music. My church has both a contemporary service and a traditional service. The traditional has an orchestra with a piano and an organ and a choir, and the traditional doesn't. The contemporary has just a band and guitars and things like that, but and so I found myself now liking the traditional more. So if that's an example of evolution, then I've evolved, and so I wish I could answer more specifically, but I love Handel, and so yeah, that's the best I can do. It shows you how little I know about that. I just don't know. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question because you made me feel uncomfortable. Is it a rebellion against God's will to give ourselves natural senses such as a microscope? Give ourselves unnatural senses such as a microscope. If he wanted us to see the small, he could have made our eyes that sensitive. Oh, no, I don't agree with that at all. I don't agree with that at all. Let me try to think of an example. Okay, I'll give you an example. Jesus got on a boat and went across the Sea of Galilee. That man could have walked across the whole way. He didn't need to get a boat. If God wanted Jesus to use a boat, he would have made him with pontoons. But no, Jesus used a boat. So there was a quote unquote modern invention, and Jesus took advantage of it. Jesus went into the synagogue. Did you know there's no example in the Old Testament of them going into synagogues? God never told them to build a synagogue. Nowhere. They were to go to Jerusalem to worship. This whole idea of synagogues out and about is not in there. But Jesus actually went into synagogues. He went into synagogues even in Chorazin. He went into synagogues wherever he was. He would often speak in synagogues. Now, he spoke on the hillside too, but he went into synagogues. If God wanted him in synagogues, God would have made synagogues, right? Well, Jesus went into synagogues, and he used that as a forum to preach the word. So, yeah, I don't agree with that, with what you had suggested. Dr. James Tour, would you go on Joe Rogan? Stephen Meyer went on and seemed to soften Joe's theism. You can deliver the killing blow. Oh, you think I'm much better than I really am. Would I go on Joe Rogan if he invited me? Sure, I would go. Who wouldn't? But I really admire Joe Rogan. I really do. I admire his commenting on MMA, and I admire the wealth of information that he has and the way he asks questions of people. I watched the Myers interview. I've never watched an entire Joe Rogan program. It's like 3 hours, except the Stephen Meyer one, because Stephen Meyer is a good friend of mine. But I would if I was invited. But you put much more faith in me. I'm not so sure that Stephen Meyer softened Joe Rogan toward theism. I'm not sure of that at all. I watched that interview, and Joe looked a little bit antsy to me, and like he just wasn't that happy about things to me. I've seen him much happier with other visitors to his program than he was with Stephen Meyer. And then I think he was even throwing out a few interesting things at Stephen, like, maybe these people who were in the Bible, they were eating mushrooms, and that's how they had their visions and things like this. So, it's kind of funny. But to someone who loves the Bible, you generally don't say stuff like that to them. But anyway, he poked him a little bit, which is fine. But would I go? Yeah, I'd go if you think I could soften him up or deal a killing blow. From your mouth to God's ears. Dr. Tour, if they do ever succeed in a lab, do you agree that all it will prove is intelligent interference along with lots of designed experiments? Yeah. If they succeeded in making life in the lab, it would prove that we could make life in the lab, that humans had made life in the lab. It still would not be a good model for the origin of life unless they could then do the similar thing, doing it in a prebiotic fashion. First of all, using chemicals that would have been available on a prebiotic Earth, and using techniques to simulate conditions that would have been available on an early Earth. You're an MMA fan? Who is your favorite fighter or combat style? Wow. Okay, so I will reveal something to you. I used to box, and so in my generation, in the New York City area, boxing was not looked upon as a negative, really bad thing. And so I used to box. I fought right up into the Junior Olympics, the pre-Olympics, is I fought right up to that level. And my father had my father took me out of it, and I was very hurt by that. People didn't know about brain injury at the time, or we didn't think much about it. And I was just getting to the age where blows were getting harder and harder because people were getting stronger. And so I had a very good coach. He was a former professional fighter, and in fact, in my office, I have a big Everlast thing that's signed by about 20 different world champions, and just lots of them have signed this, and it was accumulated at the Boxing Hall of Fame, which I've been to in upstate New York. So I love boxing, and MMA was not around. At least I didn't know anything about it growing up, and so I do find it intriguing. I mean, John Jones it's tough to beat John Jones. I mean, the guy's amazing. It's too bad that his personal life has interfered so much with his professional life in just the different things that have happened to him. But boy, what a fighter! And it's going to be hard. And also, was it JSP that it's hard to get better than him. So these are really, really good fighters. And do I like watching it? Sometimes for like 10 minutes I will watch it just to chill out at night. When I'm brushing my teeth or something, I'll watch it. So yeah, I confess to that. Yeah, I confess to that. And yeah, okay. Other than Jesus, what person in the Bible you would want to have a conversation over dinner with? Yeah, that's really interesting. There's so many that I'd love to have a conversation with over dinner. I think it would probably be Abraham. It'd be Abraham. I've talked to him about this. How did you hold out for 25 years? I mean, God's making these promises, and then He comes and visits you 25 years later, and you're having a son, and then what made you be so gracious with your nephew Lot to let him choose the lush green territory, and you took the bad side? What was going through your mind at that time? There was these promises that were given. How did you hold on to these things? And how did you obey God when He told you to take your son's life? I mean, how did you do that? So it'd probably be Abraham. Why are you dodging the question? Tell us your favorite. Yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't dodge the question. What happens is Eric is putting the questions up for me, and as soon as I read it, he takes it away, and he puts the next question up there. And so I forgot that you asked what my favorite molecule is. I would, I love graphene. Now, graphene is more of a material. It's not a discrete molecule, but if it's small enough, it can be in discrete structure. So I love graphene. I think it is just an amazing molecule. Even small molecules like camphor, you show these bicyclic structures are really quite amazing to me. Something like strychnine, this structure. Many synthetic chemists have made strychnine. It was an amazing target that people would go after in the 1960s. R.B. Woodward made vitamin B12 I believe it was in the 1950s. Amazing molecule, just amazing structure, vitamin B12. So I have books on molecular structure. I love molecules. So you might as well ask me, which one of my 4 children do I love the most? It's just kind of tough. I mean, they all have their amazing features. Okay, if you could redo your interaction with the Origin of Life community, would you change anything? Yeah. I might not even do it. I'm not sure that it was worth it. I've been ostracized by not just the Origin of Life community. I've been ostracized by much broader than that. I go into meetings sometimes and people will kind of look and they'll get hushed. I go into gatherings and like, tourists here. So I'm not sure that I would even go at it, but I've already thrown my hat into this ring, which means that I've accepted the challenge. And so it's too late. I've already stepped in the ring. I can't back out now. Dr. Tour, honest question. With all the talk about aliens going on, do you believe in extraterrestrial life and the possible making contact to Earth? Or do you think they already have? A lot of this goes beyond the realm of science because a lot of things we don't have evidence for, or at least scientific verification. As far as the Bible goes, it's not revealed whether there's life on other planets. It's not revealed. Anything that we have seen, any planet we can analyze, that we've been able to analyze, it doesn't look like there's life. It doesn't look like it's conducive for life. Earth is one of the very few places where you can look up and behold the heavens. I mean, that you can have a clear atmosphere like this to just look up and behold things, and to have the conditions that we have. But I think that if you look at it scripturally, and so let me engage with the many Christians that watch my channel, because this is also science and faith, and biblically we see lots of contact between Jesus and demonic life that is not human. Demonic life that many people don't see, and he's interacting with them. People say, "Oh, that's idiotic." Well, why is it so idiotic? You're talking about aliens. Isn't that idiotic? I mean, so Jesus interacted with them, and you see a lot of interaction between Jesus and them. Just every couple of pages, it seems like. And then before Jesus, and as soon as Jesus goes away, you see much less interaction with the demonic, with demons, much less. And it goes to more normal levels in the book of Acts. And that's because, as it speaks about in the book of Revelation, the enemy had been thrown down at that time. And you see this extreme interaction. And what's interesting, if people have tracked this, if you look at UFO sightings, used to be called UFOs. If you look at these sightings, that very often it's coupled to where occult practices are taking place. When there's a lot of occult practices in a city, there's a lot more UFO sightings. There's a lot more sightings of these sorts of things. And then what happens is a prayer team will go in and start praying. And people start getting converted and lives start changing. And UFO sightings go away. And so you can dismiss this, but you can say, well, are these sightings, are these interactions with demonic, spiritual creatures that are here on earth, but we don't normally see them? That would be another explanation, and that would be something that aligns more with the Bible rather than them coming from some faraway place, that they're already here. But the interactions become more obvious when people are in the occult and these sorts of things, because the interactions go way up. And as soon as prayer teams come in, these things begin to fade away. So that maybe throws something else out at you on that. Given the probabilities that you have calculated on biological compounds, have you run probability calculations on how a complete ecosystem can exist in the observable, stable condition that we see? No, I have not, and I don't have the ability to do that. And even that calculation for the lifetime on the hydrolysis of these of RNA and the proteins, that calculation, I worked with several others to come up with that equation. And it's interesting because I knew that when you have one molecule, it's very hard to keep these things around, because as I said on that video, I learned this from molecular electronics, that you're dealing with one molecule and not moles of molecules. But when Dave said, a peptide bond has a half-life of 7 years, he was trying to dismiss my time argument. I said, time is short. Now, even if it were 7 years for a peptide bond, if it were 7 years, that's short in geological abiogenesis type time frames. 7 years is the twinkling of an eye. But that was for one peptide bond. And what I tried to explain to him during the debate, and I'm not sure that he got it, if you have a peptide bond and in one of my videos, if a peptide bond, one of those linkages is 7 years, now you have a peptide that's 300 linkages long, then that is going to, now you're talking about each one of those has a half-life of 7 years. So you have 300 of them. Every one of them has a half-life of 7 years. So now that has got to be much, much smaller than 7 years itself. It's 7 years for one, not 7 years for a 300-mer. So I was at a meeting with a very famous mathematician who does math just around biology, the very questions you're talking about. His name is Martin Nowak. And I asked Martin about this. I said, say the peptide bond is 7 years. What would a 300-mer, what would be the half-life of a single molecule of a 300-mer? And he wrote the thing out, and he wrote like a mathematician. It was unreadable to me. Not just because it wasn't that he was using any symbols that I don't understand. His handwriting was so bad, I couldn't understand it. And he came out with this number. He didn't give me that final equation. He said, here's what the half-life would be. And I forget the exact question that I asked him. And he changed the 7 years to 10 years to just approximate it out. And it came out, it came out 18 days. And so I came back and I spoke to the chair of my department, who's a theoretical chemist. I said, I was sitting with Martin Nowak. He says, you know Martin Nowak? I said, yeah, I know Martin Nowak. He's a professor at Harvard. And so he said, and I said, here's how Martin calculated this. And the chair of my department is a theoretical chemist, so his math is much better than mine. And he looked at it. He says, yeah, this is a way you could calculate it. As chemists, we would do it this way. But he didn't write it out for me. He just explained to me how we would do it. And it wasn't sufficient. And so then I was with my sister and my brother-in-law because, as I said, my dad passed away in February. And so I was with my brother and my sister, and my brother-in-law was also there. And both my sister and my brother-in-law are mathematicians. And they're both at Berkeley. And so I said, here's a problem. Here's what Martin Nowak wrote out for me. And my sister knows Martin. Martin knows my sister. Can you explain this to me in terms that I can understand it? So we went through it together. It took us, I don't know, they went through it very slowly with me for about an hour and a half or 2 hours one night. And then the next day, my brother-in-law comes back. He says, this reduces to a much simpler equation. And boom, that's the equation that I showed you in that video. And it all falls out into that equation. And so it is totally logical that it should just be the half-life of one of those bonds divided by the number of bonds that you have. And it doesn't matter. There's several ways to get at this. But it all gives that same number. So I didn't even calculate that by myself, but I had those two mathematicians from Berkeley and a mathematician from Harvard and a theoretical chemist from Rice substantiate that. Okay, and so as far as the bigger calculation that you want, I don't even know how to do that. I'm a synthetic chemist. What is the systems chemistry, and why do detractors say you need this to understand origin of life? It's a smokescreen. You have to understand every one of these components, and systems chemistry makes it much harder for them. They dig their own grave when they say you have to understand systems chemistry, because a cell is a system. It is several layers working on top of layers, working on top of layers. It's not independent little things. Systems chemistry means you have much more integration between each phase of this. What origin of life researchers are doing, they're doing a tiny little experiment. And they say, well, you got to understand systems chemistry, and then you'll understand. You got to understand systems chemistry. You're the ones that have to see the massive layers that are going on here. All right, what does Dr. James think of the verse in the Quran which says that humans will never be able to create a living organism, even as simple as a housefly? Well, I think that so far you're right. So far it's right. I don't know about never. Never is a long time, and But as far as so far, it's been right. We can't make a housefly. And a housefly is very, very complex compared to a bacterium. Very complex. And so, the housefly is very far away. So that one seems it's probably, at least for right now, it's right. And for this foreseeable future, it's right. What is the future of your YouTube channel, or what would you like to accomplish on social media? That's a good question. I don't know what the future is. I started this shortly before COVID, and I wasn't even I was do podcasts or something, and then COVID hit, and I had all this spare time on my hand, and then Dave Farina hit, and I felt I had to react. That's not gonna. Now I understand this poking, but anyway, so I felt I had to react, and then I got all this feedback from it, So I don't know what the future is. I guess I'll still do podcasts. I'll talk about my science. I'll talk about my faith. I've been posting. So I was, since 2005, I've been recording my weekly Bible studies and putting the audio up. And that was on all sorts of platforms. And then we started putting the audio on YouTube. And now we just started filming the weekly Bible studies. So the weekly Bible studies we put up there as well. So that's certainly on there. And when we get great discoveries, I put that on there for the world to see. And then when I think there's nonsense in science, I might talk about that. So I don't have any firm plans. I am really a chemical researcher, and the YouTube is a side thing for me. It's not the frontal thing for me. Do you think a single cell is a more complex system than the James Webb Telescope? In many ways, absolutely. In many ways, it is a more complex system. It has a lot more parts than the James Webb Telescope. It's much finer in the detail in which it's organized than the James Webb Telescope. So yes, the answer is yes. If you guys could tell me, my producer gave me this. He says, ask the audience what they would like to see from you in the future. Let them know to comment or join our new Discord chat. So the Discord chat is in the description link. If you join that, you can ask all sorts of comments and it'll show there, or write your comments underneath this video, and you can write them later. But what do you want to see from my YouTube channel? What do you want me to do? I mean, yeah, it's great. My producer, that's what I should be asking. What do you want? What do you want me to talk about? And I'll see when I can do it. But I just want you to understand, I'm not a full-time YouTuber. I have a whole nother life, and I have a ministry, and I have a career, and I have a family. And so I slip this in the few nanoseconds in between. And so, but what would you like me to do? Okay. And with that, guys, we're gonna have to wrap this up. I went the whole 2 hours. And thank you for joining me. Thank you for being, a faithful audience and coming on and hanging with me. And hopefully we will do this again before too long. Okay, God bless. If you're enjoying this series, give us a thumbs up and click the subscribe button, and that way you'll hear when we're coming out with new videos. There are no salaried employees in this organization. All the accounting, all the legal work, that's all done by friends of mine. The only thing that I have to pay for is the production work, and if you could help us out with that, I'd appreciate it. There's a link below where you can just click on that and help us in several different ways. Thank you.